Once upon a time, in the quiet riverside village of Umuk, there lived a young woman named Amara. She had recently married Obina, the only son of Mama Odiu, a proud widow known throughout the village for her sharp tongue and iron heart. When Amara discovered she was pregnant, joy filled their small compound. But that joy would soon be tested in ways no one could imagine. Mama Odiu moved into their home, claiming she wanted to help her pregnant daughter-in-law. But help was not what Amara received. From sunrise to sunset, Mama Odiu's voice rang through the compound like a whip. She insulted Amara's cooking, mocked her swollen feet, and forced her to kneel even when her belly grew heavy with child. The villagers whispered among themselves. Some pitied Amara. Others said she deserved it for marrying into Mama Odiu's house. But no one knew that something ancient was watching. Something that remembered promises made long ago by the riverside. Something that would soon shake the entire village to its core. The afternoon sun burned hot over Umuk village as Amara knelt on the hard ground, grinding cassava with trembling hands. Her pregnant belly pressed against her thighs, making every movement painful. Sweat poured down her face, mixing with tears she refused to let fall. Mama Odiu sat under the shade of the mango tree, fanning herself while neighbors gathered around her. She pointed at Amara with her chin, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Look at her. Grinding like a sick goat. When I carried Obina in my womb, I walked until my water broke. I never complained. But this generation? Weak and useless. The neighbors laughed nervously. No one dared defend Amara. Mama Odiu's anger was like fire, quick to spread and dangerous to touch. Amara paused, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. Her voice came out soft but steady. Mama, my feet are swollen. Can I rest for just a moment? Mama Odiu's eyes flashed with rage. Rest? You want to rest? When I was pregnant, I carried water from the stream 3 times a day. I cooked for 10 people. Not every woman carries the same destiny, Amara interrupted quietly. The grinding stone fell silent. The neighbors stopped laughing. Even the breeze seemed to hold its breath. Mama Odiu's face twisted with fury, but before she could speak, a strange chill passed through the compound despite the afternoon heat. That evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, Amara escaped to the riverside. Her body ached from the day's labor, but her heart ached even more. She sat on a smooth rock, her feet dangling in the cool water, and finally allowed herself to cry. The river flowed gently, its surface catching the last golden rays of sunlight. Amara closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "How much longer can I endure this?" Then she heard it. A voice, soft as silk, melodic as a mother's lullaby, calling her name from the water itself. Amara. Her eyes snapped open. The river's surface began to shimmer with silver light. The water rose slightly, forming ripples that moved against the current. Amara's breath caught in her throat as the ripples took shape, becoming the outline of a woman draped in flowing silver cloth. The figure's eyes glowed like moonlight. "I am Ezenwani Ndidiameka, keeper of this river and guardian of generations. I have watched you, child, and I have seen your suffering." Amara wanted to run, but her legs would not move. The spirit continued, her voice echoing like distant drums. "Before your child is born, pride must be washed clean from your home. If it is not, grief will drink your joy like water drinks sand." Before Amara could speak, the spirit dissolved into mist, leaving only the gentle sound of flowing water. The next morning came too quickly. Before the roosters finished crowing, Mama Odiu's voice pierced through Amara's sleep like a blade. "Amara! Get up, you lazy girl. My breakfast should have been ready an hour ago." Amara pulled herself from the mat, her body heavy with exhaustion. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the river spirit's warning over and over. What did it mean? How could she wash pride from the house? In the kitchen, she moved as quickly as her pregnant body allowed, preparing yam porridge and palm oil sauce. But her hands shook from tiredness, and as she reached for the clay pot, it slipped. Palm oil splashed across the floor like spilled blood. Before Amara could even apologize, Mama Odiu's hand flew across her face with a sharp slap that echoed through the compound. The impact made Amara stumble, her hand instinctively protecting her belly. Useless. Careless. Is this how you will care for my grandchild? Mama Odiu screamed. From the doorway, Obina watched. His eyes met Amara's for just a moment. She saw guilt there, and shame, but not courage. He said nothing. He simply turned and walked away. That silence hurt more than the slap. By midday, the entire market knew what had happened. In Umuk village, gossip traveled faster than wind. Women gathered around vegetable stalls, their voices low but eager. Did you hear? Mama Odiu slapped that girl again. That Amara must be cursed. Why else would she suffer so? I heard she spilled palm oil everywhere. Clumsy thing. When a woman cannot even hold a pot steady, how will she hold a child? The gossip reached the ears of Auntie Nina, the oldest storyteller in the village. She sat under her usual tree, selling clay pots and listening to everything. When the women finished talking, she shook her head slowly. You all speak without seeing, she said, her voice cracked with age but sharp with wisdom. When pride and innocence share a roof, thunder is never far behind. The women looked at each other, confused. What did the old woman mean? Auntie Nina just smiled mysteriously and continued shaping her clay. She had lived long enough to recognize the signs. The river was stirring. And when the river stirred, secrets long buried always rose to the surface. Meanwhile, back at the compound, Amara swept the floor with tears streaming down her face, wondering if anyone would ever believe what she saw at the river. That night, Amara fell into a deep, troubled sleep. In her dream, she stood on the riverbank under a moonless sky. The water before her was not clear but muddy and thick, swirling with darkness. Then she heard it. A baby crying. Her heart seized with panic. She looked down and saw a golden child floating in the muddy water, struggling, drowning. Amara reached out desperately, but her arms would not move. She screamed, but no sound came from her mouth. The river spirit appeared beside her, eyes sad and knowing. Only through washing with this child see light. Only through humility will pride release its grip. Suddenly, the golden child sank beneath the surface. Amara woke with a gasp, her heart pounding like drums. She sat up quickly, and that's when she noticed it. Her bedsheet was soaked, drenched as if someone had poured water over her. But it was not sweat. She looked up. Water dripped from the ceiling, one drop at a time, though the roof was completely dry. The drops fell only on her mat, nowhere else. Beside her, Obina slept soundly, unaware. Amara touched the water with trembling fingers. It was cold, colder than any well water. And it smelled faintly of river moss and ancient earth. The spirit's warning was not just a dream. It was real. And time was running out. From that day forward, Amara changed her approach. Instead of defending herself against Mama Odiu's cruelty, she met it with even greater kindness. When insulted, she smiled. When ordered, she obeyed without complaint. When Mama Odiu's tea grew cold, Amara prepared fresh one without being asked. The villagers noticed, and they mocked her for it. That girl has no backbone, one woman said while pounding yam. She's afraid. That's why she behaves like a slave, another added. But the old palm wine tapper, a quiet man who spent his days climbing trees, watched Amara carefully. One evening, as she fetched water with her swollen belly, he muttered to himself with a knowing smile. She's not weak. She's cooking something deeper than stew. Mama Odiu, however, grew more suspicious. Why was this girl suddenly so obedient? It made her uncomfortable, like waiting for thunder after seeing lightning. She watched Amara with narrowed eyes, waiting for her to make a mistake. But Amara made no mistakes. Every morning, she brought Mama Odiu warm water for her bath. Every afternoon, she found her during the heat. Every evening, she massaged her feet without being asked. And every night, Amara returned to the river, whispering prayers the spirit might hear, begging for clarity, for courage, for a way to save her unborn child. Market day arrived bright and loud. Women balanced baskets on their heads, children chased each other between stalls, and the air smelled of roasted corn and fresh fish. Amara walked slowly behind Mama Odiu, carrying a heavy basket despite her pregnancy. They stopped at the vegetable seller's store. Mama Odiu began inspecting tomatoes when another woman, Mama Obi, approached with a sly smile. Mama Odiu. I hear your daughter-in-law is giving you trouble. Mama Odiu's eyes lit up with the opportunity to complain. Trouble? That is an understatement. This girl is lazy, careless, and disrespectful. I don't know what my son saw in her. The crowd began to gather, eager for entertainment. Amara stood quietly, her head bowed. And you know what pains me most? Mama Odiu continued, her voice rising. She will raise my grandchild. A woman who cannot even boil water properly will raise my blood. The crowd murmured in agreement. Amara's hands tightened on the basket handle. Something inside her shifted, like a door opening. She lifted her head and looked directly into Mama Odiu's eyes. Her voice came out calm but clear enough for everyone to hear. Then help me raise the child, Mama. Begin by washing what touches his mother. The entire market fell silent. Even the chickens stopped clucking. Every eye turned to Amara, then to Mama Odiu. Mama Odiu's face turned purple with rage. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. When she finally found her voice, it came out as a roar. You dare tell me, to wash your filthy underclothes. The crowd gasped. Some covered their mouths in shock. Others shook their heads in disbelief. What kind of daughter-in-law speaks to her mother-in-law this way? This girl has lost her mind. Mama Odiu screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Amara. She wants me, a respected woman of this village, to wash her underwear like a common servant. Before Amara could explain, Obina appeared from nowhere, his face dark with anger and shame. He grabbed Amara's arm roughly and dragged her through the market while people whispered and pointed. The journey home was silent and terrible. When they reached the compound, Obine finally spoke, his voice cold. Have you gone mad? Do you want to destroy my family's name? Amara tried to explain about the river, the spirit, the warning, but Obina would not listen. I don't want to hear your excuses. You have humiliated my mother and me. That night, as darkness covered Umuk village, 3 owls landed on the compound's fence. Their eyes glowed yellow in the moonlight, and their hooting sounded like warnings. In her room, Mama Odiu could not sleep. She kept hearing a baby crying somewhere far away, though no baby was near. The next morning, disturbed by his wife's strange behavior and his mother's restless nights, Obina decided to seek wisdom. He walked to the far end of the village where Elder Emezi lived, a man so old that even grandfathers called him grandfather. Elder Emezi sat on his veranda, carving a walking stick with hands that barely shook despite his age. He looked up when Obina approached and gestured for him to sit. You come with trouble on your face, the elder said without greeting. Obina explained everything, the market incident, his wife's strange request, his mother's anger, the owls that appeared last night. Elder Emezi listened without interrupting, his ancient eyes seeming to see beyond Obina's words. When Obina finished, Elder Emezi was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke, his voice like dry leaves rustling. Your wife's words are not insolence, my son. They are prophecy. Obina's blood ran cold. Prophecy. What do you mean? Elder Emezi leaned forward, his eyes suddenly sharp. Your mother once stood by that same river, many seasons ago. Long before you were born. Obinna felt his heart skip. I don't understand. Few do, Elder Emezi replied. But the river remembers everything. And debts unpaid always come to collect. Elder Emezi settled back in his chair and began to speak, his voice carrying the weight of buried history. Many years ago, your mother was married but had no children. Month after month, year after year, her womb remained empty. The other wives mocked her. Your father grew distant. She was drowning in shame. Obinna listened, shocked. He had never heard this story. One night, the elder continued, Mama Odiu went to the river in desperation. She knelt on the bank and wept until her voice was gone. Then she made a vow to Ezenwani Nidiameka, the river spirit. She promised that if granted a child, she would forever serve humility. She would wash the feet of the poor, care for the rejected, and never let pride poison her heart. The elder's eyes grew dark. The river answered her prayer. Within 3 months, she was pregnant with you. Obinna's mouth went dry. Then what happened? Your father died when you were young, and grief hardened your mother's heart. Pride crept in where humility once lived. She forgot her promise. And the river? Elder Emezi paused. The river always remembers. Obinna stood up quickly, his mind spinning. If this was true, then Amara's request was not madness. It was the only way to save his unborn child. Amara returned to the river that evening, her heart heavy with desperation. She knelt by the water's edge and wept openly, not caring who might see. Please, she whispered to the flowing water. Please, I don't know what else to do. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. My husband is ashamed of me. My mother-in-law wants me gone. But I only want to save my baby. The river began to glow softly, and the spirit appeared once more, her form shimmering like silver moonlight on water. You have done well, daughter, Ezenwani said gently. But the path ahead will hurt before it heals. Why must she wash my underwear? Amara asked desperately. Why something so humiliating? The spirit's eyes filled with ancient sadness. Because pride hides in what we refuse to touch. Your mother-in-law once promised to serve the lowest and wash the feet of the rejected. She broke that promise. Now, she must wash what she considers beneath her, not to shame her, but to cleanse her. Amara's tears fell into the river. What if she refuses? Then your child will pay the price of her pride. The spirit began to fade. Mercy lies in the hands of those who mock you. The washing must happen willingly, or not at all. Amara was left alone with the terrible knowledge that her baby's life depended on the humility of a proud woman who despised her. When Obinna returned home, he found his mother sitting outside, staring at nothing. He sat beside her, his heart pounding. Mama, I spoke with Elder Emezi today. Mama Odiu did not look at him. And he told me about the river. About your promise. Her body went rigid. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, her voice came out cold and hard. That old man talks too much. Is it true? Obinna pressed. Did you make a vow to the river spirit? Mama Odiu stood up sharply. That was a lifetime ago. I was desperate and foolish. I don't owe that river anything anymore. Mama, please. Amara is not trying to insult you. She's trying to save our child. Mama Odiu's eyes flashed with anger. I will never stoop so low. Never. I am a respected woman in this village. I will not wash that girl's underwear like a common servant. She stormed into her room and slammed the door. But that night, as she lay in bed, her hands began to tremble uncontrollably. She tried to stop them, but they shook like leaves in a storm. It was the first sign. The curse had begun. 3 days passed. Mama Odiu's hands continued to shake, getting worse each day. She could barely hold a cup of water without spilling it. She could not eat without food falling from her trembling fingers. The villagers noticed. Whispers spread. Something is wrong with Mama Odiu. Maybe it's old age. Or maybe something else. But what terrified everyone most was what happened to Amara. One morning, as she was sweeping the compound, Amara suddenly stopped. Her hand moved to her belly, her face going pale. The baby, who usually kicked and moved throughout the day, was completely still. She waited. Nothing. She pressed her belly gently. Still nothing. Panic rose in her throat like bile. She stumbled inside and lay on her mat, tears streaming down her face. Please, baby. Please move. Please. Hours passed. The baby remained silent. By evening, Obina rushed to fetch the village midwife, Momangozi, an old woman with skilled hands and sharp instincts. She examined Amara carefully, pressing her ear against the swollen belly, listening. Her face grew grave. She listened again, moving to different positions. Finally, she sat back and shook her head slowly. I cannot find the heartbeat, she whispered. Amara's scream shattered the evening air. Outside, Mama Odiu heard it, and for the first time, fear gripped her trembling heart. That night, something extraordinary happened. The river, which had flowed gently for generations within its banks, suddenly rose. Water spilled over the edges, flooding the nearby farms and paths. Villagers scrambled to save their belongings as the water advanced steadily. But strangely, the flood stopped just before reaching Amara's compound. The water formed a perfect circle around their home, not touching it, as if an invisible wall held it back. People gathered at a safe distance, watching in awe and fear. The elders whispered among themselves. The young ones pointed and gasped. The river has come to visit, someone said. But why? Why now? Auntie Nina, the old storyteller, stood at the edge of the crowd, her eyes knowing. She spoke loud enough for all to hear. The river does not visit without purpose. Someone here has a debt to pay. All eyes turned toward Mama Odiu's compound. The message was clear. The river was waiting. Waiting for pride to bend. Waiting for a promise to be fulfilled. Inside the house, Mama Odiu sat on her mat, her trembling hands clutched together, staring at the wall. She could hear the water outside, surrounding them like a patient predator. And for the first time in many years, Mama Odiu felt truly afraid. Dawn broke over a village transformed. The floodwaters had not receded, but neither had they advanced. They simply waited, a shimmering barrier around the compound. Amara woke with a resolve harder than stone. She had not slept. Her baby still had not moved. Time was running out, and she knew what she had to do. She filled a clay basin with water from their compound well. She took her underwear, the ones she had washed the day before, and held them in her hands. Then she walked outside where the entire village had gathered, watching. The morning sun cast long shadows as Amara moved slowly to the center of the compound. Every eye followed her. Mama Odiu emerged from her room, confused by the noise. Amara knelt on the hard ground, her pregnant belly between her knees. She placed the basin before her and looked up at her mother-in-law with eyes that held no anger, only desperate hope. Her voice rang clear across the silent crowd. Mama, this is not about pride or shame. This is about life and death. One last chance, wash them, and wash your pride. Save your grandchild. Mama Odiu's face twisted with rage and humiliation. She raised her hand as if to strike Amara. But the moment her hand lifted, the basin tipped on its own. Water spilled out, glowing silver like liquid moonlight. The crowd gasped and stepped back. The water did not sink into the ground but spread in a shining pool. The silver water rose from the ground like morning mist, defying nature's laws. It gathered and swirled, forming a shape that made even the bravest men step backward. A figure emerged from the glowing water, a woman draped in flowing silver cloth, her eyes like twin moons, her presence commanding and ancient. She was beautiful and terrible all at once. Ezenwani Ndidiameka, Elder Emezi whispered, falling to his knees. Others followed, bowing low. The spirit's voice filled the air like thunder and song combined. I am the keeper of this river, the guardian of promises, the witness of vows. Her eyes fixed on Mama Odiyu, who stood frozen, her trembling hands now shaking violently. You knelt by my waters 28 seasons ago. You wept and begged for a child. You promised humility forever. I blessed your womb. The crowd murmured in shock. So it was true. But grief turned your heart to stone, the spirit continued. Pride grew where humility died. You forgot that blessings come with responsibility. Mama Odiyu's legs gave way. She collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Forgive me, she choked out. I forgot. I forgot. The spirit turned to Amara. This daughter of yours carries a special child. But pride poisons the womb. The washing is not shame, it is salvation. It is the cleansing of 28 years of broken promises. The spirit's form began to shimmer. Choose now, Mama Odiyu. Wash her garments, or bury your grandchild. For a long moment, time seemed to stop. The entire village held its breath. Even the wind ceased to blow. Mama Odiyu knelt there, tears pouring down her weathered face. Her whole body shook, not from the curse now, but from the weight of 28 years of pride finally breaking. She looked at Amara, really looked at her, and saw not an enemy but a young woman carrying life within her. She saw the daughter she should have been to this girl, the love she should have shown. Forgive me, Mama Odiyu whispered again. Forgive this foolish old woman. With trembling hands that suddenly felt lighter, she crawled forward. She picked up Amara's underwear from the basin. The crowd gasped, no one had ever seen Mama Odiyu humble herself this way. She dipped the garments in the glowing silver water and began to wash. Her tears fell into the basin, mixing with the spirit's water. She washed slowly, thoroughly, each motion breaking years of hardened pride. I was wrong, she sobbed as she washed. I was so wrong. Please forgive me, my daughter. Please forgive me. As her hands moved through the water, something miraculous happened. The trembling that had plagued her for days suddenly stopped. Her hands became steady again. Strong. And then, Amara gasped loudly. Her hands flew to her belly. The baby kicked. Once, twice, 3 times, stronger than it had ever kicked before. She burst into tears. He's moving. The baby is moving. The spirit smiled, and for the first time, her expression held warmth. The silver glow around the compound began to soften, turning golden like sunrise. The river remembers humility, Ezenwani said gently. Just as it remembers pride. You have washed more than cloth today, Mama Odiyu. You have washed away years of bitterness. She turned to the crowd. Let this be a lesson to all of you, Muke. Pride blinds, but humility heals. What seems like shame is often salvation in disguise. The spirit began to fade like mist under morning sun. The floodwaters around the compound receded slowly, flowing back to the river as gently as they had come. Mama Odiyu remained kneeling, the washed garments in her hands, her face transformed. The hardness that had lived in her eyes for so long was gone, replaced by something softer, something almost childlike. She looked up at Amara. Please, she whispered. Please forgive this wicked woman. I have been cruel to you. I have been blind. Amara knelt beside her mother-in-law, taking the old woman's hands in hers. There is nothing to forgive, Mama. You have saved my child. You have saved us all. They embraced there in the center of the compound while the entire village watched in tears. Even the men wept openly, unashamed. They had witnessed something sacred, something that would be told for generations. Obinna stood watching his wife and his mother, tears streaming down his face, grateful beyond words. 4 days later, on a night when the moon hung full and bright, Amara's labor began. It started gently, a tightening in her belly, a slow ache in her back. But within hours, the pain intensified. The sky opened up with rain, fierce and sudden, turning the village paths into rivers. Thunder cracked overhead like breaking stone. Lightning illuminated the compound in brilliant white flashes. Mama Ngozi, the midwife, arrived drenched but determined. Mama Odiyu, now transformed in spirit, stayed by Amara's side, wiping her forehead, holding her hand, whispering encouragements. "Push, my daughter. Push. You are strong. You can do this." The storm raged outside, but inside the small room, love held steady. Hour after hour, Amara labored while the rain hammered the roof. Then, just as the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the storm suddenly stopped. Complete silence fell over the village. And in that sacred silence, a baby's cry pierced the air. Strong. Healthy. Alive. Mama Ngozi cleaned the newborn and placed him on Amara's chest. "A boy," she announced, smiling. "Perfect in every way." Amara wept with joy, exhausted but complete. Mama Odiyu leaned over them both, tears falling on the baby's tiny head. Outside, the villagers who had stayed awake through the storm began to emerge. They saw the sunrise breaking through the clouds, painting the sky gold and pink. The river flowed calm and clear, reflecting the new morning light. 40 days later, as tradition demanded, the naming ceremony was held. The entire village gathered in Mama Odiyu's compound, which had been cleaned and decorated with palm fronds and white cloth. Elder Emezi presided over the ceremony, his ancient voice carrying the weight of blessing. Amara sat on a mat, the baby wrapped in new white cloth in her arms. Obinna stood beside her, proud and grateful. Mama Odiyu sat close, her face glowing with a grandmother's love. The elder lifted the baby gently. "What name have you chosen for this child?" Obinna spoke clearly. "His name is Kizaram, God has answered my plea." The crowd erupted in cheers and ululation. Women danced. Drums played. Children laughed and ran between the adults. But the most moving moment came when Mama Odiyu stood to speak. The compound fell silent. Everyone remembered her transformation, the washing, the miracle. Her voice shook with emotion. "I stand before you today as a woman remade. For 28 years, I carried pride like a crown. But pride is a heavy burden that crushes everything it touches." She looked at Amara with eyes full of love. "This daughter that I once despised saved me. She could have let me die in my foolishness. But she fought for me, even when I hurt her." Mama Odiyu's voice broke. "I ask forgiveness from everyone I have hurt with my sharp tongue and hard heart. I ask that you remember this day, not as the day Mama Odiyu was humiliated, but as the day she was freed." The transformation in Mama Odiyu sparked something unexpected in the village. Women began gathering by the riverside each full moon, bringing symbolic cloths to wash, representing the cleansing of pride, envy, and bitterness from their hearts. What started as a small group of curious women grew into a village-wide movement. Young and old, rich and poor, they came to the water's edge to participate in what became known as the Cleansing Festival. Elder Emezi blessed the ceremony, and Auntie Nina helped lead the songs. The women would kneel by the water, wash their clothes while speaking their confessions and prayers, then hang them on lines to dry in the sun. "I wash away my jealousy of my neighbor," one woman would say. "I wash away my bitter words toward my husband," another would confess. "I wash away my pride that made me look down on others," a third would add. The river seemed to respond to these ceremonies. Its waters ran clearer. Fish became more abundant. Crops near the riverbank grew stronger and healthier than anywhere else. On the third full moon after Kizaram's birth, the village held a special ceremony honoring Amara. They crowned her with flowers and titled her Eneni Amara, Mother of Grace, for the grace she showed when she had every reason to be bitter. Amara stood before them, baby Kizaram on her back, and reminded them, grace is not weakness. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is love those who hurt you. As seasons changed and years passed, Mama Odiu continued her transformation. The woman who once refused to touch a broom now swept the church compound every morning. The woman who mocked the poor now brought food to widows. But her most important work began when young wives came to her for advice. At first, they were nervous. Mama Odiu's reputation preceded her. But they found a different woman now, soft-spoken and wise. She would sit with them under the mango tree and listen to their complaints about difficult mothers-in-law, harsh husbands, or challenging circumstances. Then she would share her own story, hiding nothing. I was that wicked mother-in-law, she would say. I made my daughter suffer because I was blind with pride. I almost killed my grandchild because I thought I was above humility. The young women would listen, shocked and moved. How did you change, Mama? I didn't change myself, Mama Odiu would reply, her voice gentle. I was broken first, then remade. Pride has to die before love can live. Her teachings spread beyond Umuk. Women from neighboring villages began visiting, seeking her counsel. The woman who was once known for her sharp tongue became celebrated for her wise heart. And through it all, she remained close to Amara and little Kizaram, who grew strong and bright, his laughter filling the compound that once echoed with cruelty. One evening, when Kizaram was 3 years old, Amara took him to the river. The sun was setting, painting the water orange and gold. She sat on the same rock where she had first encountered the spirit and lifted her son onto her lap. See this river, my son, she said softly. It is more than water. Kizaram looked at the flowing stream with wide, curious eyes. What is it, Mama? It is memory. It is witness. It is teacher. Amara touched the water with her fingers. This river taught us that pride is a poison and humility is medicine. As if in response to her words, the water began to shimmer gently. Not dramatically like before, but softly, like a smile. Amara heard it, that same melodic whisper she had heard years ago. Not words this time, just a feeling, a presence, an acknowledgement. Thank you, Amara whispered to the water. Thank you for saving us all. The river rippled gently, catching the last rays of sunset. A warm breeze touched Amara's face, feeling like a mother's caress. Kizaram pointed at the water. Mama, it's shining. Amara smiled and held him closer. Yes, my son. It shines for those who remember. Years continued to pass peacefully. Kizaram grew into a kind and thoughtful boy, while his parents' love deepened with time. The compound that once rang with cruelty now echoed with joy. But time spares no one. Mama Odiu grew old and frail, her hair completely white, her steps slow and careful. Yet her spirit remained gentle and her eyes clear. One cool evening, as the harmattan wind whispered through the village, Mama Odiu called Amara to her bedside. Her breathing was shallow, her voice weak. My daughter, she whispered, taking Amara's hand. I need to tell you something before I go. Don't speak like that, Mama, Amara said, tears already forming. You will be here with us for many more years. Mama Odiu smiled softly. We both know my time is near. But I am not afraid. She squeezed Amara's hand with surprising strength. You were not sent to serve me, child. You were sent to heal me. You were sent to save me from myself. Tears rolled down Amara's cheeks. You saved me too, Mama. You became the mother I never had. The river knew, Mama Odiu whispered, her eyes distant. The river knew what I needed. It sent you to break me so I could be remade. That night, as the village slept under a blanket of stars, Mama Odiu passed away peacefully. Her hands rested on a clean white cloth, the same cloth she had used just that morning to wash baby clothes for a young mother in the village. She died as she had learned to live, in service, in humility, in love. On the evening after Mama Odiu's burial, Amara and Obina took young Kizaram to the riverside. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the water. The boy was now old enough to understand stories, old enough to remember. They sat together on the smooth rocks where everything had begun years ago. Amara held her son's hand and began to speak. Kizaram, I want to tell you about your grandmother, and about this river, and about the day that changed all our lives. She told him everything, the cruelty, the suffering, the spirit warning, the washing, the miracle of his birth. She held nothing back, painting the story with honest words. When she finished, Kizaram was quiet for a long moment, looking at the flowing water with new understanding. Finally, he asked, Mama, why did the river spirit help you? Amara smiled. Because I asked. Because I was humble enough to listen. Because I chose love when hate would have been easier. Obina placed his hand on his son's shoulder. Remember this, my son, never let pride live where love should dwell. Your grandmother learned this lesson late, but she learned it well. The three of them sat in comfortable silence as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon. The river flowed on, eternal and patient, carrying its ancient wisdom to all who would listen. And as darkness gently covered the village of Umuk, one truth remained bright as starlight: he who kneels to wash another's pain will never drown in his own. The story is finished, but its lesson lives forever.